The cop pulled me over and whispered, "Drive to the station. Don't go home tonight, trust me." I was Matthew Davis, a data analyst at a mid-sized financial firm in Manhattan called Sterling Holdings. It was Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. I was running late for a date and already stressed from a 12-hour shift going over complex algorithms. I was driving my 5-year-old Honda Civic through a quiet warehouse district near the Brooklyn Bridge. That's when the flashing lights hit my rearview mirror. It wasn't a patrol car. It was a dark, unmarked Ford Taurus. I pulled over, hands gripping the steering wheel tight. The driver, a stocky man with a severe face, got out. He didn't look like a traffic cop. He moved like a detective. He was wearing a dark, slightly rumpled uniform. I rolled down my window halfway. He didn't ask for my license or registration. He didn't even look me in the eye. He spoke low, fast, and rough. "You driving too fast back there, son. Got to check your tail light." As he stepped up to the car, a second car, a beat-up sedan, sped past us, running the stop sign. For a fraction of a second, the officer put his hand on my door handle and leaned in. His name tag read Sterling Hale. "Listen to me," he hissed, his voice barely a whisper. "I cut you off on purpose. I created a near-miss accident. They're watching you." My blood ran cold. "Who? I don't understand." He reached into his uniform pocket and deftly slipped something small and cool into my coat pocket. It felt like metal and plastic. "Drive to the precinct station on Fulton Street. Now, do not go home. Do not use your regular phone, trust me." He straightened up quickly, then tapped my coat pocket once. He gave me a generic, bored look. "Tail light looks fine, get going and slow down." Then he was back in his car and gone. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely pull back onto the road. I checked my rearview mirror. No flashing lights, no pursuit. Just the unsettling feeling that something impossible had just happened. I drove exactly 35 miles per hour toward Fulton Street, just like he said. Once I hit the heavy traffic of downtown Brooklyn, I pulled the item out of my coat. It was a generic flash drive, black plastic, no markings. This was the reason he risked his career. I couldn't just take it to the precinct. If a police officer warned me away from a threat and I showed up on his territory with evidence, I could be walking into a trap. Officer Hale's warning was specific: "Don't go home tonight." That meant the threat wasn't tomorrow, it was now. I needed to see what was on that drive without getting caught. I remembered someone who might know what to do. Someone who left Sterling Holdings a year ago because she knew exactly how rotten things were getting. I pulled into a dimly lit parking garage on 10th Street, killing the engine and sinking into the seat. I took the oldest, cheapest flip phone I had in the glove compartment, one I hadn't used in 2 years. I dialed her number. She picked up on the third ring. "Hello, Amelia, it's Matthew, I need your help." I think I just got targeted by Olympus Security. There was a long silence on the other end, thick with immediate fear. "Matthew," she finally said, "where are you? What did you find out about the Cerberus project?" Amelia's voice was shaky, quiet. I could hear traffic noise, but she sounded miles away. "I need you to tell me exactly what you have," she instructed. "Use this line only, and don't use your name again." I explained the near miss, the cop, and the flash drive in my coat pocket. I described the few fragmented file names I saw before the drive locked itself down. "A flash drive. That confirms it," Amelia said, sounding strangely resolved. "Meet me at the New York Public Library main branch in 45 minutes. Basement Research Archives. You need a secure terminal, and I need to see that drive." I hung up and started driving toward Manhattan, keeping off the main highways. Amelia was a life raft. She had been a compliance officer at Sterling Holdings. Her job was to track every anomaly, every suspicious invoice. She left suddenly a year ago, right after a wave of unusual mandatory audits began. 42 minutes later, I found Amelia in the quiet, hushed basement of the library. She was wearing a baseball cap and dark glasses indoors. She had a thick laptop bag. "The Cerberus Project," she whispered as I sat down. "It's the code name for a multi-billion-dollar fraud. They weren't just cooking the books, they were siphoning funds from defense contracts for over 5 years." She opened her laptop and inserted the flash drive into a specialized port, running a decryption program. The employees who caught the missing money trail, the ones who initiated internal inquiries, they were the ones targeted for an audit by Olympus Security, Amelia explained. She pulled up a spreadsheet on her secure screen. The document was titled Sterling Holdings Audit Dispositions. "I tracked the first 3 before I quit," she said, tapping the screen. "Look at this." The first name was Hollis Brennan, a senior accountant. Disposition: voluntarily resigned, relocated to Monaco 6 months after audit. The second, Dara Hayes, a manager in logistics. Disposition: terminated for cause, relocated to Geneva 4 months after audit. The third, Danny Morgan, an IT specialist. Disposition: early retirement, relocated to Lausanne 5 months after audit. "They didn't resign," Amelia said, her voice dropping. "They vanished." They were all people who had access to the full defense contracts and who had flagged irregularities. And Olympus Security, they're not a security firm, Matthew. They're a systematic corporate elimination service, she stated, her eyes burning with intensity. They specialize in removing problems, not protecting assets. They cover the disappearance by filing these fake relocation reports. They claim the employees just took the payoff and started a new life in Europe. My stomach dropped like a stone. "How many?" Amelia closed her eyes briefly, breathing in the horror of the number. "I have evidence of at least 17 employees over 5 years who fit the pattern. People who were about to expose the Cerberus fraud and then suddenly relocated overseas. You were next, Matthew. Your background as a data analyst meant you were close enough to stumble onto the same data I have." She pointed to the screen where her decryption was progressing. "The flash drive is critical. I'm calling it the evidence drive. It contains the financial audit reports and communication trails that prove the fraud. If we can get this drive fully decrypted, we can prove not just financial crimes, but 17 counts of murder and conspiracy." The scope of the danger was now sickeningly clear. This wasn't a petty crime. This was high-level, organized execution. The decryption program hit 52%. "We have to move," Amelia said, snapping her laptop shut. "They know you didn't go home and they know you have something. We need to go dark right now." Amelia shoved her laptop into her bag. The decryption of the evidence drive was paused at 52%. That percentage felt like a ticking clock, counting down our time alive. "They know we met," she said, pulling me toward the library exit. "I put a trace program on the drive. If they access the network, they'll know the laptop's last location and yours." We abandoned my Honda Civic in the parking garage. The risk of it being tracked was too high. We took the subway north, riding only 2 stops before jumping off and switching to a cab. We paid the cab driver entirely in $100 bills, no credit card, no app. Our destination was Matthew's apartment. I had to get the hard copies. I kept physical backups of the suspicious Cerberus transactions, I explained to Amelia as we drove. "I hid them in the subfloor of my closet. They are coded and dated. The evidence drive has the digital proof, but the physical copies prove I wasn't the only one looking." When we arrived at my building on East 34th Street, Amelia insisted we use the service entrance. "If they are sophisticated enough to run an elimination service, they have sophisticated surveillance," she warned. We took the stairs up 7 flights to my apartment, Unit 704. The hallway was quiet, maybe too quiet. I reached for my key. Amelia grabbed my arm. "Wait." She pointed to the molding around the doorframe. A tiny scratch, almost invisible, was now just a fraction wider than I remembered it. The lock hadn't been picked. It had been tensioned and bypassed by professionals. "They're inside," I breathed. "No, they were just here," Amelia countered, her eyes scanning the floor. "Look." Near the door was a barely visible smear of ash. A freshly extinguished cigarette had been ground into the industrial carpet. They had been in my apartment mere minutes ago. My heart hammered against my ribs. We were almost caught. We crept to the side door. I knew I had to risk it. I needed those physical files. "Stay here," I whispered. I slid the key in slowly and pushed the door open just enough to see inside. The living room looked normal, but the kitchen cabinet doors were slightly ajar. I moved silently to the bedroom closet. I pulled up the carpet corner. The subfloor was untouched. I breathed a sigh of relief. The folders were there, 34 pages of transactions, meticulously cross-referenced. Just as I pulled the folders free, Amelia hissed through the crack in the door. "Matthew." Black SUV, tinted windows, pulling up out front. I slammed the subfloor back down and grabbed my jacket. We ran back to the service stairs, taking them down 7 flights at a sprint. We burst out of the back alley and onto a side street. The black SUV was already idling, but the driver hadn't spotted us yet. Amelia pulled me toward a rental car lot. They tracked the cab, she realized. They knew the general vicinity. She checked her pockets for the rental key she always carried. It was for her cousin's place. We got into a nondescript gray sedan. Amelia gunned the engine just as the SUV peeled into the alley behind us. The chase was terrifying. We went through 3 red lights in 2 residential neighborhoods. They weren't trying to pull us over, they were trying to box us in. Their driving was professional and aggressive. "They're too good," I yelled over the engine noise. "We need to get off the grid completely." Amelia was focused, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "I know a place. It's the only place my family feels safe. It's a remote cabin owned by my cousin Kieran. We used to retreat there when the internal audits at Sterling got too volatile. The location wasn't just random, it was strategic. A known safe space outside the corporate surveillance loop. We finally managed to lose the SUV by ducking into the maze of the Queens Midtown Tunnel traffic, just as the agents were forced to take a different lane. We sped north, keeping to secondary roads. As we put more distance between us and the city, the true terror set in. They weren't amateurs. They were highly trained professionals hired to eliminate 17 people, and we were the next target. We were driving into the wilderness, taking the evidence drive and 34 pages of hard evidence with us. And now they knew exactly what we looked like. The remote cabin in upstate New York felt like another world. It was small, sturdy, and entirely off the grid, nestled deep in the Catskill Mountains. The only light came from a crackling fire and Amelia's heavily shielded laptop screen. The first thing we did was search the internet for Officer Sterling Hale. Amelia found the news report immediately. It was from 3 years ago and detailed a missing person case. Daniel Hale, a mid-level manager at Sterling Holdings, who had allegedly resigned and relocated to Zurich after an internal audit. Daniel Hale was Officer Hale's older brother, Amelia whispered. "He's not just a sympathetic cop, he's a victim's family member. He's been working this from the inside." This revelation changed everything. Hale's warning wasn't a random act of heroism. It was a targeted effort by a man who had already lost a brother to the Olympus Elimination Service. But the chilling realization was that Hale's position in the local police force meant the system was compromised. If Hale, an honest cop, was worried about the local precinct, it meant Olympus Security had paid off the right people in local law enforcement to ensure the missing person reports were filed as routine, voluntary departures. We couldn't trust anyone wearing a local badge. Our only hope was to go federal. Amelia had an old, reliable contact, Agent Tania Cortez in the FBI's white-collar crime division. She investigated the financial irregularities at Sterling Holdings 2 years ago, but the case went nowhere, Amelia explained, dialing a heavily encrypted line on her secured satellite phone. They shut her down internally. "She'll be skeptical, but she'll be listening." Agent Cortez answered with a sharp, professional tone. Amelia introduced the situation carefully, focusing only on the Cerberus Project fraud and the evidence drive. Cortez listened patiently, but her response was guarded. "Amelia, I remember the Cerberus case," Cortez said, her voice flat. "It died for lack of physical evidence. We can't act on the word of 2 former employees with a flash drive we can't verify." "We can verify it," I interjected, grabbing the phone. "My name is Matthew Davis. I'm the one they were hunting tonight. The drive is currently at 68% decryption. Give us a few hours. I can send you a partial file now, a key financial document that proves the siphoning from the defense contracts." I quickly pulled the partially decrypted file. It was a single, undeniable ledger entry. Amelia sent it to Cortez's secured email. The line went silent for a long, agonizing moment. "All right, Mr. Davis," Cortez finally said. "That number, that's the real thing. It proves the scope is in the billions. I'm not bringing you in yet, but I'm moving from skeptical to cautiously cooperating." She told us to stay put, keep the phone line open, and under no circumstances leave the cabin. Just as we started to feel a sliver of hope, Amelia's phone pinged with an encrypted text message. It was a new number. "It's Hale," Amelia said, reading the screen. The message was short, cryptic, and provided a terrifying new piece of information. Ellisthorne, CEO, 531 West, the Predator's Den. Ellis Thorne was the CEO of Olympus Security, the very top of the elimination chain. Hale, the insider, had just given us the head of the snake and a coded address. Hale was risking his life to provide the identity of the person who killed his brother. We had the full picture now. The fraud Cerberus, the executor Thorne, the system Olympus, and the scope 17 victims. We had to bring the evidence directly to the top. Cortez is setting up surveillance, Amelia said, looking at me. But this is the only man who can confirm the murders on tape. We need a confession. I stared at the evidence drive, now at 71%. The fear was still there, but it was being replaced by a cold, sharp focus. I knew what had to be done. The decision was simple but terrifying. If we turned the evidence drive over to the FBI, Ellis Thorne, the CEO of Olympus, would claim the fraud was the work of rogue elements. He'd walk away from the murders. We needed a confession. We needed Thorne to talk about the 17 eliminations on tape. I contacted Agent Cortez, giving her the coded address 531 West, which Amelia identified as a highly exclusive private restaurant near Central Park. Thorne used it for sensitive business. Cortez agreed to the sting operation, but she set clear boundaries. This was a surveillance op. The FBI would not engage until the confession was secured. I was the bait. The plan was for me to offer Thorne the evidence drive in exchange for my life and $50,000 in cash. Crucially, I would tell him the data was already backed up and timed for digital release if I didn't check in every 15 minutes. This was the critical lie. It was the only thing powerful enough to make a man like Thorne talk before securing the physical evidence. Cortez gave me a small, adhesive wire to attach to my chest. It was a tiny microphone and transmitter, linking me to the FBI van parked half a block away. I wore a cheap suit I'd bought that afternoon. I carried the physical evidence drive, now 93% decrypted, in my inner jacket pocket. I walked into the restaurant at 7:45 p.m. Ellis Thorne was waiting in a secluded booth. He was immaculate, severe, and radiating cold control. He didn't look like a killer. He looked like money. "Mr. Davis," he greeted me, his voice smooth and low. "You've caused a lot of trouble for someone who's just a data analyst." "I have the drive, Mr. Thorne," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And you know what's on it. The full details of the Cerberus fraud, every transaction, every victim, 17 people." He leaned back, a chilling smile touching his lips. "The money is trivial, Matthew. The defense contracts are a distraction. I came here for the 17 names. My life for the drive and $50,000, I countered. The drive is backed up and scheduled to release publicly in 30 minutes if I don't contact my lawyer." This was the pressure point. The threat of instantaneous digital exposure. Thorne narrowed his eyes. "You think you understand what I did? I cleaned up Sterling Holdings' messes. I eliminated liabilities. 17 weak links who were going to expose the whole system for a handful of government watchdogs." He paused, his voice turning icy. "They were going to be audited. They were going to relocate, and I ensured they never made it to Europe." I felt the blood drain from my face. He had just confessed to the motive and the disposition of the victims. I hoped Cortez heard it clearly. "The drive, Matthew," Thorne demanded, extending his hand. "Not until I walk out of here alive," I insisted. "Tell me exactly how you tracked the elimination of Danny Morgan and the others. Tell me you signed the orders." Thorne scoffed, his patience finally breaking. "Of course I signed the orders," he snapped, raising his voice slightly. "They were a liability. I ran the service. 17 problems solved. Now give me the evidence before I have to solve an 18th. He made a sudden lunge toward me. That was the signal. Suddenly, the private room's door burst open. Agent Tania Cortez and 3 heavily armed FBI agents flooded the room, shouting commands. "Ellis Thorne, you are under arrest for conspiracy, federal fraud, and 17 counts of murder," Cortez announced. Thorne froze, his face shifting from arrogant contempt to absolute shock and terror. He saw the wire on my chest. As the agents moved to cuff him, I slipped the evidence drive into Cortez's outstretched hand. The immediate crisis was over. The physical evidence, combined with the clear, recorded confession, was enough to bring down the entire Olympus security enterprise. The immediate aftermath of the raid was chaos. Thorne, the CEO of Olympus, was taken into federal custody. The FBI secured the evidence drive and used the confession to execute warrants across multiple states. The investigation was massive. The sheer scale of the Cerberus project fraud, the siphoning of billions from defense contracts, required thousands of man-hours. The 17 missing employees were officially classified as murder victims. The difficulty was connecting the confession to the physical evidence, especially since no bodies had been found. This was why the trial took time. 18 months later, the federal trial for Ellis Thorne and his 3 key accomplices finally began in New York. The case was formally known as United States v. Thorne et al. I sat in the witness stand, 8 months pregnant with fear and memory. I detailed the discovery of the flash drive. I explained the pattern of the 17 victims who were covered up as relocated to Europe. Amelia Chen, my co-conspirator and my friend, testified next. She presented the forensic accounting data from the evidence drive, proving the Cerberus project was the motive for the killings. The prosecution played the wire recording of Thorne's confession in court, his voice, cold and arrogant, echoing through the courtroom, confirming 17 problems solved. That tape was the final nail. The jury returned their verdicts after 3 days of deliberation. Ellis Thorne was found guilty on every count, including RICO charges, Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, fraud, and 17 counts of conspiracy to commit murder. The judge, Justice Sterling, delivered the sentences with severe finality. Ellis Thorne received 35 years in federal prison. He would not be eligible for parole. The 3 primary accomplices, Thorne's financial manager, the head of the Olympus Elimination Service, and the data analyst who fabricated the relocation files, were each sentenced to 18 to 20 years in federal prison. Justice was served, but it was slow, painstaking, and emotionally draining. The families of the 17 victims finally had closure. The criminal conviction meant they could now pursue civil action. The assets of Olympus Security and the remaining Sterling Holdings capital involved in the Cerberus project were seized by the government. A federal compensation fund was established, distributing over $40 million in restitution to the victims' families. I stayed in close contact with Officer Sterling Hale. His actions were scrutinized heavily, but the FBI investigation cleared him. He was found to be a witness, not a conspirator, but the experience cost him his career. He saw that the corruption ran too deep within the local system he once served. He didn't want a quiet reassignment. Hale resigned from the police force 6 weeks after the sentencing. He moved into private security and consulting, focusing on internal corporate investigations, jobs where he could still fight the dark side of the system, but on his own terms. Amelia and I were compensated for our assistance and testimony. We watched as a new law was proposed in Congress, named the Daniel Hale Accountability Act, after Sterling's brother, designed to increase federal oversight on military contracts and internal corporate audits. We had won, but the victory felt heavy. The trauma was real. It was time to finally start building a life that wasn't defined by fear. It's been 3 years since the trial ended. 3 years since Ellis Thorne was put away for 35 years. 3 years since I stopped looking over my shoulder every second. The shock never truly fades, but the terror did. I still live in New York, but I don't work for a corporation anymore. I took the settlement money and the knowledge I gained, and I started my own firm. I'm a freelance security and data consultant now. I help mid-sized companies identify vulnerabilities and protect their internal whistleblowers. I use the skills I learned the hardest way possible. I know where the weak points are, because I was nearly eliminated by them. My life is fundamentally different. Every morning, I run a series of diagnostics on my home network. I check the complex security system I installed myself, the one with 3 backup power sources and a dedicated server rack. It's not paranoia, it's vigilance. It's the difference between life and a fake resignation filed from a Swiss bank. Amelia and I are still close. She works with Agent Cortez now, not officially for the FBI, but as a specialized forensic accounting contractor. She hunts down the financial white whales. She found her calling, fighting the system from the outside. And Sterling Hale, he's happy. He's running a successful private security consultancy for victims of corporate malfeasance. He finally got justice for his brother, Daniel. He found a new purpose when the old system failed him. Sometimes I think back to that moment, pulling up to my apartment, seeing that faint smear of cigarette ash. We were so close to being erased. The wisdom I gained is simple. The greatest crimes are often committed by the people in suits, protected by bureaucracy and silence. They think money and procedure can cover anything. But they can't cover evidence. They can't cover a confession. And they can't cover the persistence of a couple of people who refuse to be 17 problems solved. My life is forever changed, but it's mine. I'm stronger, I'm safer, and I'm always listening for the sound of silence when there should be noise. That silence usually means trouble.